Millie's my favourite. Look how calm she is as well.
Ray, are you all right? Ray! I see.
Any of this to happen?
I'm seeing this for the first time, and yet this is not the first time. Why am I crying? What am I crying for?
What is this? I can't remember. Not a thing, only I feel a yearning, something I never felt before. What's happening to me? Tell me, Hunter, could this be joy?
What's up? Are you happy that I'm having trouble with my Eva now? I thought it was bad when Shinji was nice, but when an emotionless, wind-up doll like you starts being sympathetic, I'm doomed!
I am not a doll.
You are! You do anything you're ordered to, don't you? You'd kill yourself if your commander told you to, wouldn't you?
Of course.
Then you are a robot, just like I thought! You're an unthinking, emotionless puppet, and I hate you!
Hello, good Hunter. I am a doll, here in this dream to look after you.
Oscar, darling, Mama cooked your favorite for you. Oh no, you mustn't complain about what you like and dislike, or that girl over there will laugh at you.
She just sits there every day, talking to that doll as if it were her real daughter.
I think it's because of the guilt she must feel. She devoted her entire life to her research, not to taking care of her own daughter.
Oh, I feel your grief.
It's like looking at porcelain figures of a mother and her child. Perhaps there really isn't much difference between humans and dolls.
Mankind creates dolls in our own image. If God exists, perhaps we're all just a bunch of dolls to him.
Hunters have told me about the church, about the gods and their love. But do the gods love their creations? I am a doll created by you humans. Would you ever think to love me? Of course. I do love you. Isn't that how you've made me?
How long has it been since we last came here together? 3 years?
Yeah. Then the last time for me was when I ran away. It still doesn't seem real to me that Mom is buried here. I can't picture her face anymore.
People let their memories fade in order to move on. Although, there are some things we must never forget. Your mother taught me how to be grateful for these memories, and I come here to remind myself how much they matter.
Do you have a picture of her?
They were all destroyed. Even this grave is empty. Nothing remains.
So you got rid of everything. My teacher said you would.
Everything I need is in my heart and mind. That will have to do for now.
Alright, hello everybody, how you guys doing today? So today we are going to be discussing, I don't know, communion. Today we are going to be discussing communion, and music. and Evangelion. So if you haven't finished Bloodborne, if you haven't finished Evangelion, I'd recommend that you skip this one for now. So, alright. So I have something up here, something that I want you to experience. So the only way I can have you experience that is if I communicate what's going on up here to you. So when I speak and when I try to describe what's going on up here, you listen to that and your own mind interprets my words and kind of constructs its own reality of what it thinks I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to explain or describe. For instance, I had a friend who lived in a place where there were no chipmunks or squirrels. When I described to him what a chipmunk looked like, I described it as having stripes down the back. When my friend, who was an artist, drew a chipmunk, or at least what he thought a chipmunk looked like, he drew it kind of like a tiger with vertical stripes going down the back. So, obviously that's a very interesting interpretation, but not quite what I was trying to express. So when I communicate with him and I try to explain what's going on up here, and I'm trying to take an image of what I have up here and I'm trying to give it to him, it isn't this perfect bridge between our minds. Really, it's just that I'm explaining something, he hears it, and then his own mind interprets those words and then constructs its own reality out of what it thinks I'm trying to describe and explain. So ultimately, his world is his own. His reality is his reality. My reality is mine. And no matter how hard he and I try, we will never be able to really connect our two realities together. They will each be independent from each other, and any kind of bridge that we connect between us is really just an illusion. Again, really, his mind is just constructing what it thinks reality is. And no matter how hard we try, we will never be able to merge or connect our realities. So, you tell me, does that please you, or does that make you upset? To think that your world is your own and no one else can touch it. No one else can really get in there and do anything with it. Everything that you experience is your own experience, and I can never experience it no matter what. And the things that I experience, you will never be able to experience no matter what. Does that make you happy, or does that make you sad? Does it upset you to think that your world is your own, and you'll never be able to share it with anyone? No one will ever be able to hijack it from you, and you'll never be able to share it either. Does that make you happy, or does that make you sad? It's almost like I'm just a man in a box, and you're just a person in a box as well. And we see the world through these very tiny straws, and no matter how hard we try, I'll never really know what's inside your box, and you'll never really know what's inside my box either. The only way to bridge our boxes, so to speak, is through that communication. But again, that's really just an illusion. I'm not transferring my thoughts to yours. I'm describing something and putting it out there, and then your brain conjures up its own image of what it thinks I'm trying to describe. And ultimately, that kind of just becomes another piece of your world. So, keep that in mind. In H.P. Lovecraft's short story, At the Mountains of Madness, it's a very interesting story about these professors of the Miskatonic University who fly to Antarctica, and they discover a very ancient underground city that was once ruled by this race of superior alien vegetable animal creatures called the Elder Things. The Elder Things communicate with each other, not through this verbal language, I guess, but they actually use this musical organ piping type noise in order to communicate with each other. And it's very lyrical, and it's like music. And they're bizarrely not quite animals, but not quite plants. Well, like the story goes on and on about how plant-like these creatures are, but also how animal-like they are, and how the professors aren't quite sure how to classify it, and they think that it might be sort of beyond the established system of classification in the world of biology. So they find the elder thing and they're like, is it a plant? Is it an animal? Is it an amphibian? We don't really know. It might be one, both, either, all. The scientists also discover another race of creature known as the Shoggoths. The Shoggoths were created by the elder things to be slaves. So the elder things were able to like hypnotically control the Shoggoths in order to build all of these underground ancient cities. And interestingly, the Shoggoths can change their shape to fit whatever task they're needed for. So that's very interesting. Gradually over time, the Shoggoths eventually, it's like they started to gain a will of their own, and then they eventually rebelled against their former masters, the Elder Things. And then they started to mimic the technology as well as the language of the Elder Things. So the Shoggoths, they didn't have those organs to allow them to have this beautiful musical piping language. So it's like they started to try to imitate that in a very imperfect way. It would kind of be like it's kind of like compared to like an angel singing versus me just talking. So like if an angel sings ode to joy, whereas I just speak ode to joy, you can detect a pretty significant difference between those two things. And that's kind of how the language of the Elder Things is described when compared to the language of the Shoggoths. The Shoggoths are just trying to imitate the language, the perfect musical language of the Elder Things, and ultimately they're unsuccessful. Ultimately, it's like the Shoggoths want to be equals to their creators rather than inferiors. So as the professors dig deeper into this underground city, they eventually find a bunch of dead Elder Things with one wounded Elder Thing who is sort of hovering over his dead comrades and is sort of sounding out this very beautiful but somber and kind of sad musical language. And the scientists realize that the Elder Thing is sort of crying over his fallen comrades. That Elder Thing is sort of weeping and is expressing emotion that the scientists themselves recognize. To those professors, it's sort of like this revelation of these Elder Things are more like men than they are aliens. In fact, I think there's a line in there that specifically goes something like, whatever they were men, or something like that. Despite being weird alien, plant, animal, amphibian things, they were men. So Ebrietas obviously mirrors a lot of this, a lot of it. I would highly recommend reading the story for yourself at the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft, because it is pretty fascinating when you think of it in the context of Bloodborne. Ebrietas is very, very, very similar to the Elder Things, and I really kind of think that maybe even humanity and the Pthumerians, how they're able to drink this blood and then change their shape into various forms, it kind of reminds me a lot of the Shoggoths. And how Ebrietas has this musical piping language, she's sort of able to sing, and the humans are just sort of talking. I think there might be something to that. Almost like that regular audible verbal communication is like a sad imitation of what Ebrietas can do. So that's very, very, very interesting. And then the fact that Ebrietas is or can be discovered in the East Underground Labyrinth, so a labyrinth that is constantly being worked on and constructed by the Pthumerians, and the Pthumerians seem to kind of hypnotically serve Ebrietas, almost like zombies, where pretty much all they ever say is. And then to also find Ebrietas again in a different underground city place, sort of at the altar of despair, supposedly weeping, as the choir says, "O fair maiden, why is that you weep?" And Ebrietas is sort of weeping over the corpse of Rom. Again, that's very, very interesting, and it seems to mirror a lot of what's going on at the Mountains of Madness. Alright, we're not done though. So Ebrietas's musical piping language, like she has like a regular language where she says things like or something like that, She has typical words or sounds, I should call them. And then she has her music, right? So in the last stage of the fight, she starts to like bleed and she starts to ooze. And then when the player character enters her close sphere, it's like you can hear this musical piping, organ chime stuff. But you can only hear it when you get close to her. Once you get away from her, you can't hear it anymore. You can still hear her doing her weird, like, blah, blah noises, but you can't hear her music. So, I think the idea is that when she starts exploding that ooze or whatever, it's that the player is able to smell it and absorb it into his or her body. Or I shouldn't say the player, I should say the player character, the player hunter. And then the hunter at that point experiences something called synesthesia. So synesthesia is this odd phenomenon where two senses are crossed. So like a person who experiences synesthesia might smell a rose and say that tasted beautifully. Or might see the color blue and say that sounded round or something like that. Or a person might hear certain instruments and kind of associate those noises with colors. So that's synesthesia. It's just like when two senses are crossed. So for instance, I can actually give you a really good example of synesthesia, because the truth is I think pretty much most people experience synesthesia. So a name like Barborbor sounds kind of round to you, doesn't it? And a name like Takiti sounds kind of sharp to you, doesn't it? Barborbor is round, Takiti is sharp, right? That might be synesthesia or something very similar to synesthesia. It's the idea that you hear something, you experience something, and then it's like a different sense in your mind is going off when it probably shouldn't be. So when Ebrietas starts to ooze this liquid and she starts to bleed that whatever it is, and the player gets near it and is able to absorb it into his body and is able to smell it, or the hunter is able to do that, he's suddenly able to hear sounds, and he's able to hear this musical piping language. But when he leaves Ebrietas' proximity, that's when the music stops. He can't hear it anymore. So I think what's going on is that it is synesthesia, and Ebrietas' blood, or whatever it is that she's oozing, if you drink it, if you consume it, if you smell it, if you do something with it, if you're able to absorb it into your body, you can actually hear something. You can actually hear her musical language. Assuming all of that is true, that leads me to believe that Ebrietas and her species, they don't communicate verbally. They don't speak words. The way they communicate with each other is by drinking each other's blood. That's how they communicate. It's like you can drink Ebrietas' blood, and then you can hear her musical voice. You can hear her singing. And that's how she's able to communicate with you, and possibly even like hypnotize you. And why do you think it is that the choir is called the choir? So the choir is like the head institution of the healing church. The top institution of the healing church is a choir, as in a subset within a church that sings. Why do you think that is? And even more importantly, why do you think blood echoes are called blood echoes? That's a very bizarre phrase, don't you think? Blood echoes. Why are they just called blood dregs? Or why are they just called blood thingies? I don't know. Why are they called blood souls? Why are they called blood echoes? That's such a bizarre term, right? That probably isn't an accident, though. I think that's very, very intentional that blood echoes are called blood echoes. I have this very strong hunch that in the world of Bloodborne, when a person drinks blood, he or she is able to hear something. He or she is able to hear and experience the world as that person experienced it and as that person's ancestry did. Okay? It's gonna get kind of crazy, Stick with me, alright? So on the steps to the Grand Cathedral where Vicar Amelia is waiting, there is a note on this little side part that reads, Heir to the ritual blood, purveyor of administration, place your hand on the altar's sacred covering and inscribe Master Lawrence's adage upon your flesh. So the purveyor of administration we can probably assume is Vicar Amelia. Amelia is right there in front of the skull. She's the one who's in charge of administering blood to people. She is probably the purveyor of administration. So she's also called heir to the ritual blood. Now what exactly does that mean? What is the heir to the ritual blood? The heir rune tells us, perhaps the heir is a hunter who bears the echoing will of those before him. And a hunter is someone who just hunts bees and then collects those blood echoes. Perhaps the heir is a hunter who bears the echoing will of those who came before. Who bears the echoing will of those who came before. And the heir rune is a picture of DNA, right? There's this philosophic and scientific idea that if you have a child, your memories are stored within your DNA and are passed down to that child. To some degree that might be sort of true. But like if you've ever played Assassin's Creed, it's sort of that idea, the idea that Desmond can experience the memories of his ancestors through his DNA. That is part of a scientific inquiry at the moment. And there is some evidence to suggest that that's sort of true, but probably not the way it's kind of depicted in science fiction and stuff like that. But I think the idea is that a literal heir in the world of Bloodborne passes down or receives the memories of his ancestors. But the heir specifically says that perhaps the heir is a hunter who bears the echoing will as in blood echoes, of those who came before. So, the echoing will, I feel like it's a pretty small leap, still a leap, but it's still a pretty small one, to say that the echoing will is referring to blood echoes, right? So a hunter, when he collects blood echoes, is collecting the echoing will of those who came before him, and that's what makes him the heir. And upon approaching the skull on the altar that Amelia is praying at, he's able to get close to it and not quite touch it, but then almost touch it. And he's able to experience a flashback, he's able to experience a memory that is not his own.
Master Willem, I've come to bid you farewell.
Oh, I know. You think now to betray me.
No, but you will never listen. I tell you, I will not forget our adage.
He's able to experience Lawrence's memory as Lawrence experienced it. The hunter didn't go through that, Lawrence did. So how is it that the hunter is able to experience Lawrence's memory? And again, keep in mind that the heir is someone who bears the echoing will of those who came before. And blood echoes are in fact called blood echoes. Blood echoes. An echo is a voice that has already spoken but is now reiterating back to people. So it's like I speak into the mountains and then my voice comes back to me. That is an echo. So a blood echo, what do you think that is? People have said that the skull is just magic, and that if you touch the skull, then you can experience something. You know, it just is magic. That's how it works. But I think that there's probably a bit more going on. I think that there's something else going on there, and I think that little note on the staircase as you're approaching Vicar Amelia is deliberate. I think that's there for a reason. And to call Amelia the heir to the ritual blood, that isn't an accident either. So, imagine this. People's memories are stored in their blood. When I experience the world, and when I die, and let's say that I'm a resident of Old Yharnam. Let's say that I'm an old man in Old Yharnam. I die, And all of my memories, all of my experiences are in my blood. So what my descendants are going to do, what my grandkids are going to do, is they're going to take my blood and they're going to drink it, and they're going to keep my memory alive in by drinking my blood and inheriting my memories. That then makes them the heir to my blood. So if my grandkids were to drink my blood after I die, they might then be able to experience flashbacks that are not their own. They might be able to approach something that was important to me and then experience a flashback that doesn't belong to them. It's my flashback, but they're able to experience it as if it was theirs. And what is it that people partake in the Grand Cathedral? What is it that we partake in? What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Tell me, what is it that we partake in? Let us partake in communion. Let us partake in communion. Let us drink blood and partake in communion. So communion as in communication, right? Right, communion. Communication, union. Communion, right? Let us partake in communion. So it comes across to me that a blood echo is a reiteration of someone's memory, of someone's voice. An echo is just a reiteration of what someone else has already said, right? It's almost like an undead voice that's still speaking after the voice has already stopped. Upon consuming the blood of the ancestor, the descendant is able to inherit his voice, his memories, and his will. And then that person is able to experience the world exactly as he experienced it. So do you remember that little thing that we did at the beginning about the chipmunk and about how my friend and I, we will never be able to connect our boxes and we will never be able to experience the world as the other person experiences it? Well, in the world of Bloodborne, you actually can. The hunter is able to experience Lawrence's flashbacks even though he isn't Lawrence. Somehow he is able to experience the world as Lawrence experienced it. So when it says that the old adage is passed down from vicar to vicar, and it calls the next vicar the heir to the ritual blood, I think what it's trying to get at is that when one vicar dies, the next vicar drinks his blood and inherits his memories and thereby inherits the old adage, fear the old blood. So from every vicar, they each drink the blood of the old vicar. So when this vicar dies, the next vicar drinks his blood. When this vicar dies, the next vicar drinks his blood. And because this vicar right here drank this vicar's blood, this vicar over here is now drinking the blood of both of them. This vicar is able to inherit both of their wills, both of their memories, both of their blood echoes. So from every vicar, from the first to the last, it's like there's this long chain of blood that is just constantly being passed down. And it's just like each person is able to inherit the memories of the last and of all of the other people in that chain who preceded. And that includes Lawrence. Lawrence, the first vicar. Lawrence is the first vicar, Amelia is the last. Whoever followed in Lawrence's footsteps and became the next vicar, that vicar drank Lawrence's blood and thereby inherited Lawrence's memories. When that vicar died, the next vicar drank that vicar's blood, and Lawrence's blood was in there also. So that next vicar, that third vicar, was able to inherit the memories of the second vicar as well as the first vicar, Lawrence. And that happened again and again and again and again and again and again and again, or however many vicars there have been, all the way down to Amelia. So Lawrence's blood, Lawrence's memories are inside of Amelia. Lawrence's blood echoes are inside of Amelia. And when the hunter kills Amelia and absorbs Amelia's blood echoes, he is able to absorb Lawrence's old memories and the old adage,
fear the old blood.
And that is why when the hunter approaches Lawrence's skull, he is able to experience a flashback that is not his own. It doesn't belong to him. He didn't go through that. He didn't experience it, but he is able to experience that as if he had. Isn't that insane? But I'm pretty sure that's what's going on, and I'm pretty sure that's why blood echoes are called blood echoes. And ultimately, that's how the old adage is passed down. it isn't necessarily spoken. Siri's interrupting me again, or Cortana, whatever it is. I don't care. I hate them both. See, my only options are, do you want to let Cortana help you? Sure, or maybe later. There's no! I can't turn it off! I've tried! I've literally Googled, how does one kill Cortana? So the old adage, it might not necessarily be spoken and passed down verbally. It might just be, because Lawrence died. Did he ever have time to tell the next vicar what the old adage is? Maybe, maybe not. But either way, when the next vicar drank Lawrence's blood, maybe cracked open the skull and just drank right out of it, I think that's how that vicar was able to experience Lawrence's old memories, and was able to inherit his will, and inherit his memories and the old adage. The heir to the ritual blood is the next vicar. And as the heir rune tells us, an heir is someone who bears the echoing will of those who came before. And what is the echoing will? It's blood echoes. It's people's blood. The fact that blood echoes are called echoes, an undead voice, that isn't an accident. The fact that drinking blood is referred to as communion, as in communication, or communication, union, communion, that isn't an accident. The fact that the head institution of the Healing Church is, a choir, the choir, an institute that involves singing, that isn't an accident. The fact that when the Rosmarinus is sprayed, and you can actually hear singing out of it, that isn't an accident. A very similar thing is going on with Ebrietas, where when you get near her, you're able to hear her musical piping. Well, with the Rosmarinus, it's just a mist, but when you breathe in the mist, you're able to experience synesthesia, and you're able to hear voices. You're able to hear singing, beautiful singing. The fact that the heir rune says that perhaps the heir is a hunter who bears the echoing will of those who came before, that isn't an accident, And tell you what, let's take a look at the blood dregs, What do you see in the blood dregs? Eye, mouth. Eye, mouth. Eye, mouth, so on and so forth. Those are people's souls. Those are people's identities. Those are people's wills. Those are people's blood echoes. It isn't just that people's memories are in their souls, but it's also their identities. It's also their spirits. It's also their souls. It's also their wills, whatever you want to call it. Redgrave has a video called The Little Things in Yarnum Oedon, which is about Oedon, and he makes a very compelling case about how Oedon and the Quicksilver are both the same thing. It sounds bizarre, but if you watch the video, it's very, very interesting, very, very compelling. I would highly recommend it. And it's also said that formless Oedon exists only as a voice. So if Oedon is the Quicksilver, then assuming that everything I'm saying is correct as well, then it could be that when people consume the Quicksilver, kind of like through the Rosmarinus or something like that, you can actually hear Oedon, or the voice of Oedon, and that is Oedon. Because imagine it like this. Imagine I was able to bridge my box with yours. Imagine I was able to take my thoughts and let you experience them exactly as I experience them. At that point, you can't distinguish between your thoughts and my thoughts. They're all your thoughts at that point. You've inherited them. There is no distinction between what you think and what I think. They're all just what you think, whether you're the one who actually originated them or not. You inherited them. So what does that do to your identity? Who are you at that point? See, if you're someone who's listening to this and you're saying, Cortana, leave me alone! So if you're someone who's listening to this and is saying, I don't buy this, I don't believe this, well, if you were able to drink my blood and experience my thoughts exactly as I experienced them, guess what? You might not be able to disagree anymore. Or you might be torn between a rock and a hard place, because your identity would become a part of mine, or my identity would become a part of yours. You wouldn't be able to distinguish between you and me. We would sort of become the same thing. Your thoughts would be yours as well as mine. It would almost be like we and ours. So you might not be able to reject my thoughts and my beliefs, because they would become your thoughts and your beliefs. You would inherit them. And what does that mean for you? Who are you? Are you you anymore? There's a line with Patches where it's like the hunter approaches him and then he said, oh, the blood imbibes you. And he puts an emphasis on you. And like I don't quite understand that. I think what he's talking about is that he's just talking about the addiction. Like hunters are especially susceptible to addiction. But I don't know. For some reason, when he said that, I felt like I sort of got the idea that hunters, eventually it's like they lose who they are and they become other people because they're absorbing so many blood echoes and so many wills and so many identities that are not their own, that eventually they forget themselves. And isn't there a line that Yusefka says where she's like, you forget yourself or something like that? Or you are not yourself? Oh, that's probably nothing. So, that does mean that a hunter who spends ungodly amounts of time just hunting beasts and collecting their blood echoes, I mean, he's collecting the blood echoes of many, 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 many people. So if from generation to generation people drink the blood of the ancestor, it's like they're passing down all of these blood echoes. And then when one ancestor way down here turns into a beast, a hunter goes and kills that beast. Well, now he absorbs the blood echoes of the beast as well as that entire line of ancestry. So hunters are filled with enormous amounts of blood echoes. And I think they eventually lose their identities and they lose their sense of self. And maybe that has to do with what blood drunkenness is. A hunter almost becomes this storage vessel for all of these people's identities and all of their memories and all of their souls. The ritual blood tells us when all is melted in blood, all is reborn. And what is the ritual blood? You know, it's skulls rising out of the blood. So, you know, a face is a symbol of someone's identity. Well, a skull, like the face of a skull, is the symbol of a dead person's identity. And because there are skulls rising out of the blood, that is a symbol that people's deceased identities are in that blood. Many, 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 many people who died, whose blood was all collected together into this one source, their identities are in there. They might be dead, but their memories and their experiences are in there. So let's just assume that all of this is true. Let's just entertain the idea, all right? Okay? Okay. So Gascoigne is a hunter. Gascoigne probably kills his wife, Viola. When Gascoigne kills Viola, he absorbs her blood echoes. He absorbs her soul, right? Her memories, everything that makes her her, he absorbs that. Then the hunter, the player hunter, kills Gascoigne, and the hunter absorbs Gascoigne's blood echoes, which includes Viola's. He absorbs both of their blood echoes, right? When the little girl, Gascoigne's youngest daughter, gets killed by a pig, or eaten by a pig, that pig absorbs that little girl's blood echoes, that little girl's soul. When the hunter kills the pig, he absorbs the soul of the pig, as well as everyone that pig consumed, which would include the little girl. So at that point, the hunter has the pig's soul in his body, in his vessel, Gascoigne's soul, Viola's soul, as well as the little girl's identity. So they're all together inside of his vessel. He is now containing all of their blood echoes, all of their spirit, all of their soul, all of their identity, all of their memories inside of himself. And you tell me, do you think that they would like that, or do you think that they would not like that? Of all the places they could be, where do you think they would want to be? Would they want to be together, or would they want to be apart? You know, people look at Bloodborne, and they see a lot of horror, and a lot of atrocity, and a lot of cynicism. I don't see that at all. I see Bloodborne as being an incredibly, incredibly, incredibly optimistic game, where no matter how the game ends, ultimately it will be a happy ending. And I see Gascoigne's and Viola's and the little girls as ultimately being a peaceful end. And I think the idea is that the hunter's job is to help people find peace and to bring people all together. Alright? Well, let's keep going with this, alright? So the church, so assuming that all of this is true, right? All of this is true, everything I'm saying, let's just pretend that it's all true for a minute, alright? So the church knows that the old blood is going to turn people into beasts, right? Fear the old blood. The church knows what's going to happen, but they're giving people the blood anyways. and they're kind of deceiving them into taking it. If people become beasts, do you think it might be a part of the Healing Church's plan? Do you think it might be something that they want? You know, even the vicars know what's going to happen. Even the vicars know that people are going to turn into beasts. You know, Lawrence's skull is on the altar, and it's a beastly skull. So the vicars know that they're going to turn into beasts. They know what awaits them. They know that everyone's going to turn into a beast. And do you think that might be part of their plan? So they know that everyone that they give the blood to is going to turn into a beast. And they also know, or they also employ hunters to go out and kill those beasts. What they're doing is they're purposefully turning people into beasts and then sending out hunters to go and kill those beasts and collecting all of those blood echoes, so that way everyone's blood echoes can all amalgamate together inside of a singular hunter's body, inside of one hunter's vessel. So they're all together inside of the hunters, and they end up wherever the hunters ultimately die. And where is it that the hunters eventually die? Where does a hunter inevitably go? Eventually, the hunter goes to the hunter's dream, this very heavenly-like place, which is kind of a graveyard. He goes there, he gets beheaded, he drops all of his blood, and so all of the blood echoes that he had gathered up to that point spill all over the garden and all over the roots of the great tree. And ultimately, that's where everyone's souls end up. So you tell me, do you think that that might all be a part of the Healing Church's plan? Maybe this is all something that the Healing Church wants. Maybe the Healing Church, they want people to turn into beasts. And that's why, even though the vicars, they know the old adage, they inherit the old adage is passed down to them, but what they tell the public is seek the old blood. The old adage is fear the old blood, but what they tell people is seek the old blood. Why do they do that? So it comes across to me that the Healing Church wants to help everyone get to heaven. That's ultimately what they want. The barriers that are in between you and me, they want to remove those, so that way you and I can experience the same things together without any kind of obstacle between us. They want us to have a perfect line of communication, so that way whatever world I experience is the same one that you experience, and we can experience each other's world without any kind of hindrance. When our blood pools together and becomes the same thing, we're able to experience the exact same world. And when we're taken inside of a hunter, and that hunter is eventually beheaded inside of the hunter's dream, we are then deposited to the most heavenly place in the entire game. And let's think about Mikolash for a second. Why does Mikolash speak plural?
Cause. Or some say cosm. Do you hear our prayers? No, we shall not abandon the dream. No one can catch us. No one can stop us now.
Grant us eyes, grant us eyes. Why does he use the word us? Like, hey Mikolash, you're by yourself. I don't know if you know this, but everybody's gone. He might just be crazy, and he might not know that, but he's also aware of the hunter, and he's aware that the hunter is pursuing him. Mikolash is kind of crazy, but he's also aware. So why does he use a word like us? Why does he say we? Why does he say we will not abandon the dream? The truth is that I think Mikolash might represent a collective organism, and he might know that. He might be speaking for many, 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 many people. You know? If he is the host of a nightmare, right, of Nightmares Up Here, and he's wearing a cage on his head, and the School of Mensis is known for taking people and imprisoning them, maybe it's supposed to be like his head is a prison that people are being kept in. There are people inside of Mikolash's head, and because there are so many people inside of a human skull, he's kind of driven insane by that. And he uses words like we and our and us. Maybe there's something to that. And when Mikolash says, now I'm waking up, I'll forget everything, maybe that's the equivalent of all of the souls that are in his head being released and being forgotten. And then being absorbed by the hunter, that is. And maybe that's ultimately a good thing. Again, I see Bloodborne as being a very, 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 very optimistic, very happy work. I think that it has a very, very good end. I don't see it being cynical at all. That's kind of what I love about it. Alright. So, I think I've established all of the important things that I really need to establish. So now we can talk about the really important thing, I guess, which is Evangelion Neon Genesis! Oh, that's an anime! Alright, so let me see if I can explain to you the plot of Evangelion. Okay? Long, long ago, there was this species of creature known as the first ancestral race, first primordial race, something like that. I don't know. They were probably humanoid or something like that. But then something happened and it's like their planet started to die or something like that. And so then they gathered up all of their souls inside of these like seeds of life or these eggs, and they dispatched them throughout the universe to inhabit other planets, right? And it's like there are two seeds slash eggs, right? Two different kinds, as far as I know. There are the eggs of Adam, and then the eggs of Lilith, or it could be that each egg has its own independent deity attached to it. But we're just going to focus on those two because those are the only two that matter. The others, they just disappear. Okay, whatever. Okay. So you have the egg of Lilith and the egg of Adam. The egg of Adam is destined to arrive on Earth and allow the Earth to be populated by these very bizarre creatures known as angels. Angels are different from humans in that they are immortal. They are Cortana! So Earth is the rightful inheritance of the angels. The angels are these immortal creatures. They are like humans. In fact, they're even called humans on numerous occasions. But the difference is that they are immortal. They don't really advance or like develop technology or anything like that. And they don't have any kind of community. They don't really work together. They all work independently. So the angels are gifted with the seed of life, meaning that they're immortal, infinite energy, those sorts of things. And they are descendants of Adam. And even though Adam is masculine, even though it's male, the angels are, like Adam is often called like the mother of the angels. So it's kind of asexual in that regard. Asexual? Non-sexual? So Adam arrives at Earth and he's supposed to inhabit it with the angels who are these immortal beings. But then you have this egg over here called the egg of Lilith that arrives at Earth and crashes on accident. I believe this is called first impact. So, there's a big rule, a big rule. Two species, or a planet cannot be inhabited by two of these eggs. It can either be an egg of Lilith or an egg of Adam. It can't be both. So one of these eggs has to go. Because Earth is the rightful inheritance of the angels, it should belong to Adam. But when the egg of Lilith crashed on Earth, it broke the Spear of Longinus. So every egg is equipped with this weapon called the Spear of Longinus that is capable of destroying an angel or a Lilith, I guess. It's capable of destroying Adam, it's capable of destroying Lilith. But because Lilith's spear broke when she crashed on Earth, Adam's spear had to be used by default and kind of put him into a stasis. So I guess the spear doesn't kill Adam or Lilith. It just kind of impales them and paralyzes them. So they can't do any harm. So that avoids some kind of catastrophe because now these two things that should not coexist are now no longer coexisting. One of them is kind of in this hibernated stasis. So, Lilith then produces offspring, however she does that, and humanity is born at some point in time throughout many generations of evolution or something like that. Okay, and then the Earth arrives and is created and all of history happens, I guess, exactly as it happens, I guess. Okay. We're barely getting started. So eventually these scientists arrive in Antarctica, and that's where they discover Adam's paralyzed body, the egg of Adam, something like that, something, I don't know. They do some testing on it. They try to merge human DNA with Adam DNA, and that's a big no-no. That's a big no-no, okay? Humans are descended from Lilith. So humans have Lilith's DNA, a tiny bit of DNA in their DNA. A little bit of Lilith is inside of every human. And Lilith and Adam are not supposed to coexist. When they do that, bad stuff happens. So when these scientists try to merge a human with Adam, big boom happens. Okay? And then everything gets a bit real at that point. And then this thing called Second Impact happens, and it's this big catastrophe, and half of the human population dies, and then there are these big exterminatory wars, and then the entire biosphere is changed permanently, and everything is bad. Okay, so that's Second Impact. So First Impact, Lilith arrives. Second Impact, Adam wakes up because scientists made some owies. Okay. On every egg, the first ancestral race also included these things called the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is sort of like a little guidebook about what would happen when either an egg arrives or when two egg arrives or something like that. It's basically saying, here's what's going to happen in case XYZ happens, I guess. It's like a fortune cookie of death. And part of the Dead Sea Scrolls says that 15 years after more angels will arrive and will try to wipe out all life on the existing planet, on this case Earth, and then the angels will rule Earth without humanity. So it's like Earth can belong either to the angels or it can belong to the humans. It can't belong to both. In order to fight the angels who are going to come to Earth and try to destroy everyone, humanity pulls all of its resources together, led by Nerve, a group called, well, at the time it was called Gehrman. Gehrman. It was called Gehrman. Gehrman or Gehrman, one of those two, I don't know. So all of civilization pulls all of its resources into this organization called Gehrman, so that way they can produce these giant robots called Evas. Now, if you remember, angels are immortal. They can't be killed by humans. They can't be killed with traditional weaponry. They can be weakened and made vulnerable by traditional weaponry, but they cannot be killed by weaponry. Seemingly, the only thing that can really destroy an angel is another angel. So, what the humans do, what Gehrman does, is they use Adam's DNA. They take bits of Adam, and they use that to create these giant cyborg colossus creatures known as Evas or Evangelions. So only these giant Evas can kill the angels, alright? Okay, here's the thing. In order to make the Evas commandable or inhabitable or pilotable or something like that, they have to hold the soul of a human woman. So a human woman has to die, and then her soul has to be channeled into this giant Evangelion bionic robot cyborg thing, so that way it can be pilotable by the woman's heir, by her descendants, by her children. So for instance, there is a character, the main protagonist in the story is named Shinji Ikari, I believe, right? Isn't it Ikari? Yes. His mother, whose name I forget, she dies and her soul is fused with Evangelion Unit 1. And the only person who can pilot Evangelion Unit 1 is Shinji, her son. Okay? So basically, Evangelion Unit 1 is a mom. The giant robot is the soul of a mother, and the pilot gets inside of the mother. The pilot is dropped into the spinal column of the thing. So you think like the spinal column is what controls the body, right? So that's where the pilot goes. And then the pilot, the cockpit is flooded with this odd orangey liquid thing called LCL. And it's a little bit confusing about exactly what that is, but we'll get into that later. But the pilot is still able to breathe, sort of like a baby in the womb. So, the giant robot is the mom. The pilot inside of the robot is the mother's child. So basically, it's like a giant prego robot. That's Evangelion Part 1. So, there are also these things called AT fields. AT fields are very important. So in the universe of Evangelion, every mind, every consciousness is surrounded by an AT field, right? The AT field is essentially my box. The AT field is what's keeping me, and not you, right? I am me because my consciousness is surrounded, is contained by an AT field. And your consciousness, your brain, is surrounded by an AT field. And because of these AT fields, our brains can never connect with each other. But if those AT fields are broken down, then suddenly it's like our brains can begin to mingle and we can sort of begin to fuse and become the same thing. Alright, again, it's a pretty crazy, convoluted story, but basically there are these various shadowy organizations that are all trying to essentially either break or not break down people's AT fields so that way humanity can all merge together into one singular organism and become God. Or become a godlike entity. That's known as human instrumentality. And that is hypothetically the big point of Evangelion, is that it's about breaking down everyone's barriers so that way everyone can all amalgamate together into a singular entity and exist peacefully without weakness and la 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 la. Okay. Half the plot of Evangelion is basically the main protagonist refusing to move the plot forward. Okay, so at the end of Evangelion, basically what happens is human instrumentality happens, and Adam and Lilith fuse together? Is that what happens? Or is it just Lilith, or is it just humanity's DNA comes together with Lilith or something like that? I don't know. It's a minute difference. It probably doesn't matter. Human instrumentality happens, and everyone's AT fields suddenly drop. So everyone is able to melt into this LCL liquid, this primordial soup, and everyone's souls all amalgamate together into a giant orange ocean. And they all exist together. And Shinji, who is the main protagonist, is faced with a choice. Does he want to exist independently of everyone else, or does he want to be a part of everyone else and exist in the giant orange ocean? And ultimately, Shinji decides that he would rather live independently and be his own person with his own thoughts, and is able to form genuine connections with people, not because he's forced to, but because he chooses to, and he's able to live in a world where he can reject people, and people can accept him, and they're able to find what we might call true love, or something like that. I don't know. And that's the end of Evangelion. I think I explained it. Did I do a good job? I don't know. Alright, so there's a lot of similarity in the imagery between Bloodborne and Evangelion. A lot. There are some characters who are kind of almost identical. Before we get into that, though, let's talk about human instrumentality. So So the idea that everyone all becomes the same thing and they all amalgamate together into this orange ocean is called human instrumentality. Instrumentality. An instrument. A musical instrument. So in the Eva units, you have the giant Evangelion robot, and then you have the pilot inside the robot. And it's sort of like their souls or their consciousness kind of merges together. And how well they're able to sync with each other is known as harmonics. Harmonics, almost like music. Harmony. The very last angel, who is also the first angel, we won't get into that, Kaoru, he ends by playing with Ode to Joy by Beethoven. And there's this really, really important scene with him and Shinji, where Kaoru says, music is a way of communicating with each other.
May the instrumentality of humanity come about, as well as the peaceful purification of souls.
It's the fourth impact. You're witnessing the opening rites.
And if you don't know, Ode to Joy, part of the song is about the equalization of all of mankind under God and the unity of all of mankind under God. So everyone from the noble prince all the way down to the lowly beggar, they're all equalized and unified under God. Make sense? And so that's part of the reason why Kaoru has this obsession with Ode to Joy, and he calls it like mankind's greatest cultural achievement or something like that. Okay, so what's the deal with the Ode to Joy, and why is it harmonics, and why is it human instrumentality? Why is that? I'm going to show you, alright? You'll love this. This is you. This is me. Individually, we are something, aren't we? Individually, we are each something. But when you bring us together, become something greater than the sum of our parts. That is human instrumentality. That is harmonics. That is the language of the great ones in Bloodborne. Part of what they talk about in Evangelion is the idea that I have weaknesses and so do you. But if we come together, we're able to fill each other's weaknesses, and we at that point have no weaknesses. Because my strengths cover your weaknesses, and your strengths cover my weaknesses. So the more people we add, right, it could just be me, it could just be... It could be me and you, right? It could be... It could be me, it could be you, and then it could be the rest of mankind. the symphony. The more we add, the stronger we become, and the closer we get to a symphony, right? So a symphony is about all of these people coming together, each with their own individual instruments and their own individual ideas, and speaking with a singular voice, almost as a singular collective body, in order to make something beautiful. And that is why towards the end of Evangelion, we hear the song Ode to Joy by Beethoven, which is about the unification of all of mankind under God. It's being played as the end of the world is happening, and as mankind is beginning to reach what is known as human instrumentality. Did I explain that very well?
Freude, 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 schöne Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium. Wir betreten feuertrunken, himmlische dein Heiligtum. Deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Mode strenge kalt. Allen Menschen werden brüder, wo dein sanfte Flügel
He's run away.
Stop, don't come back.
At the end of Evangelion, everyone is turned into this orangey liquid LCL, and that represents all of their souls together, melted together. In Bloodborne, it's like people's souls are in their blood. Their identities, their memories are in their blood. So when those are all melted together, they all become the same collective thing, exactly like what's going on in Evangelion. So at Bergenworth, there is a book. It's the only book that you can read, and it's just like one line where it just says, like, when the red moon hangs low, the line between man and beast is blurred. But in Japanese, it's a little bit broader, and it's a little bit vague, I guess. It basically just says, like, the boundaries between man will, like, break down, or something like that. I forget exactly, but it's something to that effect. Not just men will become beasts, but basically the thing that becomes the thing that is me, and the thing that separates me from you, that is going to break down, and we're all kind of going to fuse together. And that's why when the red moon does descend and you're in Yahar'gul during the blood moon, It's like you see people like literally fused with the wall and stuff.
They instituted a ritual that would expedite the process and artificially evolve them. A ritual that sacrifices an older life form in order to give the fruit of life to a new one and make way for its reign. It's a programmed extinction devised and pursued since ancient times. Nerve labeled this ritual the Human Instrumentality Project.
And it's like you see those caskets where everyone's dead bodies have all kind of merged together into this abomination. It's like, yeah, again, like everything is starting to kind of fuse together and come together and collectivize and amalgamate. And Evangelion, it's a very, very similar thing, where the egg of Lilith kind of represents everyone amalgamating together and going back to whence they came. Probably should have mentioned that, but fucking Evangelion, I swear. You know, or think about Ariana. You know, when the Red Moon descends, she gives birth to something that is kind of human, but also certainly not human. It's kind of slug-like and kind of human-like. It's a little bit of both. It's almost like two things have kind of fused together and merged together to become one once the Red Moon descended. So, the ultimate point of Bloodborne is to achieve perfect communication, and to remove the barriers that are separating you from me. So that way I can experience your world exactly as you experienced it, and you can experience my world exactly as I experienced it. But when that happens, we all become a part of the same symphony, and we lose any kind of individual identity. Kind of like at the Mountains of Madness, where the Shoggoths are just imitating the language of the Elder Things, and trying to mimic their very beautiful musical voices. In the world of Bloodborne, humanity speaks with a verbal, imperfect language. When I talk to you using this verbal language, it's very, very imperfect and things fall through the gaps and you're not experiencing the world as I experience it, even though I'm trying very hard to convince you of exactly what I'm trying to convince you of. But ultimately, it's going to be flawed and imperfect, and your world is going to remain yours. That is the flaw of verbal communication. It's an imperfect imitation of how Ebrietas speaks when she is able to give you her blood and you're able to hear the world and you're able to hear these beautiful rhythms, or when you drink Lawrence's blood and you're able to experience the way he experienced it. Being able to consume my blood and experience the world exactly as I experienced it is perfect communication. That is communion. And then you lose your sense of individual identity. That is true. And we start to become the same thing. Okay, so there was a lot more that I was going to talk about. But oh goodness. I think all of this is a video for another time. So, I'm gonna talk about the similarities between Evangelion and Bloodborne, and then I think we're going to end it there. Okay, so in Evangelion, Shinji's mom dies and her soul is fused with Evangelion Unit 1, right? And ultimately, that's what she wants for reasons that we're not going to get into. Okay. Gendo is heartbroken over this, and he is really, really upset. So he wants to enact human instrumentality so that way his soul can be reunited with his wife's, Yui. I remembered her name. Her name is Yui. Yes. So Gendo wants to be reunited with Yui, and that's why he wants to enact human instrumentality, and he is hellbent on that task. That is pretty much the only thing that he cares about. Well, that, and also Rei. So Rei is a clone of Yui. So Gendo created a clone of Yui, I guess as an attempt to bring her back, but the clone is kind of soulless and hollow and empty. Despite that, Gendo really, really cares about Rei. Again, despite the fact that she's expendable. Like with his actual biological son, Shinji, he doesn't seem to care about Shinji at all. Like Shinji's about to die, and he's just like, this is fine. But when Rei, who is a clone, who has other clones of herself ready at hand, when she's about to die, Gendo is like, Rei! he really freaks out about it. So Gendo really, really cares about Yui, and he really, really cares about Rei, who is a clone of Yui. So there is a specific scene where Gendo is trying to make sure that Rei is safe. So he's opening up her dispatched cockpit, and he's even burning his hands in order to do it. He's like, ow, that hurts, ouchie, ouchie. And his glasses fall off, his glasses breaks, and then the heat is so much that his glasses actually start to like melt and bend a bit, right? And then he opens up the hatch, and he's like, Rei, are you okay? So that is Gendo showing a kind of affection towards Rei. Rei takes those glasses and keeps them, despite the fact that they aren't hers and they're broken, and she keeps them kind of just out of sentiment. And she also seems to have a kind of attachment towards Gendo, despite being kind of hollow and empty. Sometimes people will kind of insult Gendo, and her reaction is,
Don't you have faith in your own father's work?
No, of course not! How could I ever trust him again? What's wrong?
But ultimately, it's like Gendo's relationship with Rei is a superficial one, and he kind of cares about her superficially, and she is ultimately just a means to an end. She is just a tool for him to achieve what he wants, which is unification or reunification with Yui. Okay? So Rei really mimics the doll in that regard, who has the little hair comb brush thing, whatever it is, where the doll can be handed that, and then she actually cries, and she's like, could this be joy? So it's like the first time that she's ever felt joy. And spoiler alert, so there are 3 Reis. There is a little girl Rei who dies because she calls one woman an old hag, and that old hag doesn't like that. So the little girl dies. But then Rei, because she's a clone, she's just cloned again, and Rei 2 is brought back. And eventually that Rei dies selflessly, I believe. And then there is a 3rd Rei who comes along, who is, again, another clone, because there are many of them. They can just be mass-produced. And that clone is able to inherit some of the memories of the previous.
I'm seeing this for the first time, and yet this is not the first time. Why am I crying? What am I crying for?
So that's kind of the idea with the doll and Lady Maria, how they're both kind of connected. And it's like the doll is able to have memories of the waking world's workshop, where she is in fact not alive and not animate in any way. She's just sort of laying there like a doll. But despite that, she's able to have memories of that time, and she has a sentiment regarding the items in that area. And again, there is a very, very, very similar scene where the 3rd Rei, so the 2nd Rei is the one who got the glasses and kept the glasses, then that Rei dies. The 3rd Rei comes along, comes across the glasses, she's about to destroy them, she's about to throw them away, but then she starts crying. Then she feels something, and she's like, why am I crying? What is this? That is almost exactly what happens in Bloodborne with the doll. Those scenes are not identical, but they're basically the same, okay? I don't know what else to say. So if Rei is supposed to be like the doll, that also may mean that Gendo is like Gehrman. So if you remember, Gendo is the one who founded Gendo is the one who founded Gehrman. Gendo, Gehrman, Gehrman. Oh god, this is it's all too similar. Okay, so Gendo founded Gehrman, which eventually transformed into Nerve. And Gendo, I think it's supposed to be like Gehrman. Gendo wants to enact human instrumentality, wants to fuse people's souls together so that way he can be reunited with his dead wife Yui. It makes sense that that's what Gehrman wants. So Gehrman had some kind of affection for Lady Maria, but Lady Maria wasn't quite aware of them or something like that. Lady Maria dies, And then Gehrman creates this doll, and then the dream happens, and then Gehrman has the doll, but the doll is not Lady Maria, and he's ultimately unsatisfied with the doll. So I think the idea is that Gehrman, he might have even deliberately created the doll, because he thought that when the Hunter's Dream was created, the doll would become Lady Maria. Like he was literally obsessive about getting everything right about the doll and getting everything perfect. But then when the Hunter's Dream is created, the doll is not Lady Maria. The doll is like Lady Maria. The doll is connected to Lady Maria, but the doll is her own person. Lady Maria and the doll are two different entities. They have two very different personalities. They have two very different characteristics. And maybe that's why Gehrman is ultimately unsatisfied with the doll. So yeah. So I think Gehrman wants whatever it is Lawrence is after, which is probably something similar to human instrumentality, because Gehrman wants to reunite with Maria. That does make sense, given what we know about him in the lore. Okay. This is something that I thought that I was crazy about, but then I heard something from the anime, and I was like, well, maybe that's true. So the Evangelions and the Amygdala, they actually kind of remind me of each other. I know it sounds weird, but there's just something about the way the Amygdala move and the way they roar. And I don't know, some of their attacks and everything, for some reason, I don't know, just when I was fighting them, I was like, these things really remind me a lot of the Evas from Evangelion, those giant robot things. And I forget exactly where it is, but at some point the Amygdala are mentioned as false gods. And in the anime, there is a moment where the Evas are mentioned as being false gods.
They see all of our current Evas, including Unit 1, as simple placeholders to precede its completion. So that's the purpose of the Mark 6? They're taking it one step further. They've decided to create a real god instead of false ones.
So that's kind of interesting. The Amygdala don't quite make sense. I don't quite get the Amygdala. They don't really make sense to me, but maybe there is some kind of parallel with the Evas. So the Evas were created by this shadowy organization, Gehrman, Nerve, and Seele, all of that, in order to combat the angels, right? In order to fight the angels. So maybe it's that the School of Mensis, or the Healing Church, or the Choir, maybe they created the Amygdala to fight either Ebrietas or maybe even the Moon Presence or something like that. Maybe the Amygdala are a lot like the Evas, and maybe the Amygdala are supposed to be combat weapons. I don't know. Okay, so in the most recent movie, which was done in like 2012 or released in 2012, something like that. This one, this is an interesting one. I really think that we should look at that one. So there's a point where Shinji in the redo series, in the reconstruction series, I don't know what it's called. In the second series, which is like an alternate timeline, fun. Shinji almost brings about human instrumentality, and he almost brings about, or not instrumentality, but he almost brings about another impact, and he almost causes mankind to go extinct. Because of that, it's like the post-apocalyptic world is pretty bizarre, it's pretty torn up, and there are these giant Evas that are like built out of the ground and stuff, and these crosses and stuff like that, and everything is kind of mashed together. And it honestly reminds me a lot of the Hunter's Nightmare. You know, in the Hunter's Nightmare, there's that very, very memorable moment where you see an Amygdala that's sort of fused with the ground and stuff. And in Bloodborne, it's like bells have this ability to travel into different universes and stuff like that. And I can't get into this video because I want to save it for like the Lady Maria stuff, and I'm just fucking tired at this point, sorry. So I have the feeling that Lady Maria and the Healing Church, they tried to do something, and it sort of caused like an apocalypse, or like another like third impact or something like that, or second impact or first or whatever. And it really just reminds me of that scene where everything is kind of mashed together and there are like Evas that are starting to like fuse with the ground and stuff like that. I don't know. I know it seems kind of weird, and I'm going to talk about it more and elaborate on it, but I have very strong feelings about that one. Okay, so I also have this feeling that it's like Seele is supposed to be like Mensis, I think. Seele Mensis, I guess. I don't know. And there's a specific point during the end of Evangelion, that is like the final movie or whatever, where Seele says something like, "We need not cast aside our human forms," or something like that.
Humanity must evolve and shape this brave new world. That was why we created the Eva series.
We need not cast aside our human form to use Evangelion as our own private arc.
It's merely part of the process to free us all for rebirth.
And again, one of the very important but understated themes in Bloodborne that even Miyazaki has sort of elaborated on a little bit is that part of the game is about the harder you cling on to your humanity, the more terrible of a beast you're going to become. So it's like you have to be willing to cast your humanity aside in order to evolve into something greater. But I have the feeling that perhaps Mikolash or the Healing Church, they're trying to preserve what makes them human, sort of like Seele. Seele, they want to become God while maintaining their human forms. And Miyazaki and the world of Bloodborne, it's like they're saying, no, you can't do that. You have to become something else. You have to ascend to something greater if you want to become greater than human. Oh, okay. And then I guess this is the last one. This is the really important one. I guess we can talk about this a little bit. The Moon Presence. What is the Moon Presence? What is it all about? We don't know. Nobody knows. The Moon Presence has a weird face, and it's very similar to the faces of the angels in Evangelion. The angels often don't have faces, and they're often just like weirdly shaped objects and stuff like that. But whenever an angel does have a face, it honestly looks a lot like the face of the Moon Presence, or at least that's kind of what it reminds me of. So specifically, at the end of Evangelion, or at the end of the most recent movie, which is finished in like 2012, okay, the place where Lilith is kept, there are all of these skulls littered throughout this domain, and there's also blood. And I think the idea, that there's a specific line where it says like, "Here are the souls of those who did not reach infinity," or something like that. So I think the idea is that where Lilith is, this is the place where everyone's deceased souls are residing. Everyone is sort of collecting into this place. So even if you're someone who dies before instrumentality is allowed to happen, your soul is still allowed to merge with everyone else's and experience human instrumentality, even though you died before it happened. So it's like everyone's souls are being collected into the same place. The Hunter's Dream appears to be the exact same thing. Visually, it's kind of similar. And again, the Hunters are collecting everyone's blood echoes into their bodies. They go back to the Hunter's Dream by the time that their hunt is finished, and then Gehrman beheads them, and then their blood echoes all spill out all over these flowers. So, these are lumen flowers. As we've discussed many times, you know, a sunflower absorbs the sun's energies, so a lumen flower absorbs like the energy of the moon, right? So when people's blood echoes spill all over these flowers, it's like their souls are being absorbed by these flowers, and then those flowers absorb the energy of the moon, right? In other iterations of the game, the Moon Presence is also called like flora and stuff like that. So the moon, the blood moon, the Moon Presence, and the flowers, they're all kind of the same thing, right? So if we think about like the idea of like Trinity, or the idea of like the Greek gods, how they can like take many different forms and stuff like that, this is kind of like that with the Moon Presence. The Moon Presence is kind of just one iteration of what I guess that god could look like if it is a god. Because it's like the flowers, the moon, and the Moon Presence, they're all the same thing. So, when you fight the Moon Presence and defeat the Moon Presence, I think the Moon Presence is supposed to represent the souls of everyone that has been collected up to that point by every other previous hunter. So Jura was a hunter who at one point visited the hunter's dream and was at one point tethered to it. Same thing with Eileen. So Jura killed a bunch of beasts. He absorbed those beasts' souls, and also any humans that those beasts killed, he absorbed those souls as well. He absorbed those blood echoes. And then when Jura went back to the hunter's dream and he got beheaded by Gehrman and his hunt ended, all of those souls were spilled out all over the lumen flowers. Those blood echoes were absorbed by those flowers. Those flowers absorb the energy of the moon, and then it's like they're joining back with the moon, and they're being reunited, perhaps from whence they came. So, when the player defeats the moon presence, he absorbs all of those blood echoes. So it's like he absorbs all of those blood echoes, and it's like he's absorbing all of the blood echoes of all of the beasts and all of the humans who were ever killed by hunters and then brought back to the hunter's dream. He's absorbing all of that into his body. And then after that, he evolves into this squid thing, and it specifically says, you've brought about the next evolution in mankind, and it's specifically called childhood's beginning, right? So again, that is the next stage in evolution of mankind. Just like with Evangelion, the next stage of evolution for mankind is that giant LCL thing, kind of, and it's also like a giant version of Rey. It's complicated and weird, right? That is the next stage of evolution for mankind. In Bloodborne, the next evolution of mankind is that weird slug thing. And again, it's like everyone's souls are all collected into that one thing, right? So all of humanity is right there with the hunter and the squid thing, and they're now in the arms of the doll. And I mean, you tell me, out of all the places in Bloodborne that you could be, where would you want to be? Where would you want to end up? I imagine that's probably the best possible place. So, like, the egg of Lilith is the thing that brought humanity to Earth. That is humanity's origin. And the idea is that if humanity is sort of reunited with Lilith, it's like it's being reverted back to its childhood, right? So the show ends with a giant woman, a giant woman. Why do you think the robots are giant mothers? When you were a baby, your mother was very, very big relative to you, was basically a giant. So it's like to have this giant woman who represents Lilith, the mother of all of mankind, it makes sense. And the fact that humanity is small compared to that, it makes sense. It is like a child with a mother. A child is small, the mother is big, relatively. Are you following me? Whatever I was just talking about, I think I'm going to give up explaining it because I'm just tired and my voice actually hurts at this point. I've yelled at Cortana too many times. Okay, she didn't pop up. I think there was just one last thing that I would like to explain that I don't think I touched on all that well, but I don't remember what that thing was. And I guess, like, so the moon presence looks like an angel. Yeah. So maybe the moon presence is supposed to represent, like, Adam or something like that. Okay, sorry. I have to interject for a minute, because I have discovered something whilst I was editing, okay? So in Evangelion, it's like, yes, the moon presence kind of reminds me a lot of the angels, and maybe there's something to that, maybe there isn't. But what I also discovered is this little shot right here, where I saw this little bit right here in the middle where it says blood type blue. And that's when I was like, okay, I get it, I understand, okay? So in Evangelion, there are different, like, blood types or blood patterns. Like blood type orange means that something could be an angel, right? It could be an alien, but there's a little bit of ambiguity attached. If something has blood type blue, then that means that it is 100% an angel. It is there is no doubt about it. That is an angel. That is a descendant of Adam. Okay, so in the Japanese script of Bloodborne, it isn't pale blood. Pale blood isn't the translation. The translation is actually blue blood or bluish blood, something along those lines. It's more like blue blood. Okay. The original cultural significance of blue blood actually comes from an old kind of bizarre Japanese movie called Blue Christmas, which is about this group of people where they encounter a UFO, and because they encounter a UFO, that changes their blood type or something like that. So they're suddenly labeled as being blue bloods and having blue type blood. So the government orders their persecution.
That was Hitler's idea. Must I do what he did?
So that could be where this originates from. But having blood type blue signifies that something is an alien and is otherworldly. So it could be that pale blood in Bloodborne represents something that is completely inhuman, something that is completely non-human, something that is, I guess most definitely a god, something that is most definitely from a different world, something like that. And then at the end of Evangelion, it's like Shinji has a choice where he can either remain in the giant lake of LCL and just be a part of everybody else, or he can leave and he can be his own person and sort of reimagine himself. So part of the whole point of Evangelion Neon Genesis meaning a new beginning, Neon new, Genesis beginning, new beginning, Neon Genesis. Okay, you following me? Part of the whole point of Neon Genesis is that it is about recreating mankind in a new image. So it's like everyone melts together into this LCL, so now they're able to really understand each other and they're able to connect on the most intimate and personal level possible, where there are no barriers separating them at all. And so out of that lake, they are able to reimagine themselves and sort of begin again. And that does sort of coincide with the achievement where it's called Childhood's Beginning, as in mankind is sort of starting over. So it might not necessarily be that the last little infant creature at the end of the game is the representation of the collectivization of all of mankind, but it is about the new beginning for mankind. So the moon presence kind of represents the old beginning and where everyone came from originally, right? So the giant red moon in the sky is supposed to be like an egg. It is like the egg of humanity, the egg of Lilith, the progenitor of all of mankind. And it's like Lawrence and Gehrman and like the Healing Church and I guess maybe Master Willem as well. I don't know. It's like they're all trying to go back to the womb. They're all trying to go back to the egg. They're all trying to go back to where they came from, which is embodied in pale blood or the moon presence. This other ending, though, represents a new beginning. So it is a world where pale blood or Lilith or whatever it is dies and is gone. And so like the old beginning going backwards is gone. We're no longer going to do that. Instead, we're going to move forwards and we're going to do something different and we're going to reimagine ourselves. So it seems to me that still, this little squid thing represents the collectivization of all of humanity. But out of that, it is going to produce offspring, and that's kind of how souls are going to unamalgamate, individualize. I don't know, because like part of the point of Evangelion is like sort of collectivization versus individualization, and Shinji kind of chooses to be an individual, so that way he can see his friends again, as he remembered them, I guess. Okay, one last thing that I forgot to mention. So this right here is the body of Adam. So Adam is the progenitor of all of the angels, all of the non-humans. And this is Adam's body. Gendo takes Adam's body and fuses it with his own body. That allows him to sort of touch and sort of mess with these angels, right? Because it's like humanity cannot destroy angels with conventional weaponry, so they have to take Adam's DNA in order to make these giant robotic Evas in order to beat the angels. They have to use angels in order to beat the angels. Make sense? And this embryo of Adam, who is an angel, kind of reminds me of the third chord. In Evangelion, the embryo of Adam is specifically called...
This is the keystone of Human Instrumentality project, isn't it?
Correct.
So in order to start human instrumentality, the collectivization of all the souls, Gendo needs this, the body of Adam. That's very coincidental to how the umbilical cords, or the third chords, how they are kind of the latchkey to achieving squidhood, right? In order to beat the moon presence, in order to defy the moon presence, you need these third chords that kind of remind me of Adam's embryo. And in order to beat the angels in Evangelion, a person needs the DNA of Adam. I don't know, it's just, to me, they look similar, and they both serve a similar purpose in that they allow you to touch these things that look like angels / the moon presence. They look kind of similar. I don't know. It's all very similar to me. I don't know. So I guess, like, the point is that, you know, an umbilical cord, it represents the link between man and God. So in order for man to touch God, if you have the umbilical cord, then you have that link, you have that bridge, you can then touch God. Okay? Makes sense? So it's like everyone, so it's like the Hunters, Gehrman, Lawrence, I guess it's like they're all trying to get back to the moon presence. They're all trying to get back to the blood moon, so that way everyone can all be collectivized into the same thing. And then the Hunter, somehow it's different, and it does the thing, and then he does the thing, and then